Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings. Welcome to E-Commerce Conversations, a weekly podcast from Practical E-Commerce, hosted by entrepreneur Eric Bandholz.
What is going on, Internet? Eric Bandholz back again with another amazing episode from E-Commerce Conversations. I hope all is going well on the other side of the Internet. On the other side of the Internet from me, David. What's up, man?
Hey, how's it going? It's going pretty well over here. Just got the rain happening in Washington State. Per usual, we've got a classic day here going on.
Yeah, it's been a long time since our last call. I think probably about 2 years now? 3 years?
Yeah, I think about that much. Yeah, quite a long time indeed in the world of the wild internet.
Well, give her a quick rundown for our listeners, who you are, what you do, what your business is.
Sure. Yeah, I'm David. I run a little tiny apparel company that makes mountain-inspired products called Rainier Watch, inspired by Mount Rainier, Mount Tahoma out here in Washington State. Started as sort of an online community sort of thing, and it's grown into an apparel brand, which I started a couple of years ago. So I design and sell apparel and give back a portion to the national parks. I'm also a photographer and web developer and a myriad of other things, including a dad. So got my hands plenty full over here.
Sweet. Well, I'm super excited about this conversation. I try to bring on entrepreneurs of all sizes and all stages of businesses. And your story is actually quite remarkable because you launched Rainier Watch in 2013. Is that right?
Yeah, it all started with me tweeting or Xing or whatever we want. No, I'm just going to.
Oh, you were tweeting back then.
Yeah. I was tweeting back then. And basically, for those that don't know, Mount Rainier is this massively cool landmark here in Washington State, and you can see it for hundreds of miles away. And like the rumors, it rains a lot. So the mountain's not always out, quote unquote. And the mountain is out is a local phrase. And so I was tweeting on my way into work when the mountain was out, which only happens 50 to 75 days a year. And it all snowballed from there. There wasn't another way to really to answer that question online. And so that's why I picked up the Twitter machine. Hadn't used Twitter before that and just started tweeting.
So what I'm curious to know is geez, you're on your 10th year. It's been a side project this whole time, right?
Yeah, it was just started as that tweeting idea, basically. And I launched the apparel company aspect of it in, I think it was 2018. No background in e-com or design or websites. Actually, when I launched it, I was in a different career. I was a anti-money laundering investigator, basically straight out of Breaking Bad. And so I've learned plenty about everything and still have scratched the basic surface of everything that's related to D2C and e-com and all that stuff. So it's been quite the roller coaster.
How do you maintain the passion to continue working on something for so long as a side project?
Yeah, it's been, it just drives me. It's been kind of interesting because I've gotten up at 4:30, 5 a.m. before my day job for many years. Most mornings actually working on the business, designing out apparel, thinking of beanies to make and hats to make and that sort of thing. And for some reason, it's just this pedal that I keep pushing on, and I enjoy it a lot. And this year there's been astronomical growth, 1,000 percentage point kind of thing. So that's been really cool to see, but I don't know what it exactly drives me, but I just love creating things and having a beanie that I can hold in my hands of something that I made or passed off to a designer to finish, that sort of thing. It's just really fun. And it's not something that, you can really do in other ways where you can see something go from design into a tangible asset that you can hold.
How do you keep the focus in Rainier Watch and not go to other business ideas and things like that?
Yeah, focus is really difficult, especially I'm sure other entrepreneurs out there can identify with the struggle of focus. And I think I have fallen into the trap many times over the last few years of the squirrel syndrome, where you chase shiny objects and want to stick them in different holes because there's 1,000 different fun things to work on. And that's been something I've tried to maintain this year's focus specifically has been my keyword. And so I try and drop things off of my to-do list because there's, hundreds of things in different areas to do. And so just trying to focus on high ROI, like low effort. I still struggle with it. It's definitely not easy. There's 100 things to do, but it's something where I really try and limit my list. I do a lot of paper and pen notes, for example, and like will plan out my week in a bullet journal style. And for a while, when I started that a couple of years ago, I had naively written like 10 different things on each page or each day. And then I would drag them, essentially, we'll cross them out and then rewrite them, old school drag from one day to the next. And that wasn't the best process. My wife smartly pointed out that you can only do a couple things a day. What are you trying to do here? And so now I do try and limit myself to a certain amount of to-dos a day, a week, and really, have the most amount of impact that I can for those to-dos. Still struggle though, not perfect by any means.
Yeah. Are you doing fulfillment yourself, or do you work with a provider for that?
Yeah, so it's been small. It's been a small scale growth operation at this point. And so only having a couple hundred orders, well, this year it's been a lot different than that. But like I haven't had that many orders where it is to the point of a 3PL or outsourcing it. That's something I've had an open project and research into the last month or two as I start to think about the future, because of the sales of just hockey stick growth kind of thing. And so it's been all me fulfilling, which I kind of enjoy. I kind of like being able to see the different states that I ship orders to, which is all 50 states. Like it's kind of a pretty cool to see all the different mountain lovers from all over. And then having that personal touch. I used to write notes and draw mountains on the back of cards, which I don't have time for anymore, but that was a fun personal touch. I have customized packaging and packing tape and that sort of thing. That's been a really fun, like little tiny value add that makes just the product a little bit more elevated, I think, and makes it a little bit more fun and more like specific about giving back and eco-friendly, those sorts of value props I can display in the packaging. But we'll see. I'm looking at a 3PL route where, you relinquish a little bit of control, but obviously they're the experts in it and you can hopefully save a little bit or whatnot. And also looking at self-fulfillment where I hire someone to come into like a warehouse role. And I've been looking at warehouses as well where they can start packing orders. So we'll see what the future holds.
Cool. So you kind of answered my question a little bit. Like I personally feel like I would get pretty bored doing that fulfillment and almost feel like at your stage, like it would zap some of the energy out where it starts to feel like it's a little more of a burden to get through these orders than it is like, especially when you've been doing it for, 6 years now. Like, do you ever feel that burden with fulfillment? Like, does it ever wear on you where you're like, should I keep on going? Is it worth the hassle? And how do you get through that?
Yeah, that's been the question mark. And I feel like the question mark I've had over fulfillment is do it until I can't do it, basically, or don't feel the joy of doing it or whatnot. And so recently in the last month or two, that's where the feeling of it being a drag, the feeling of it being annoying, I've been starting to track my hours to see what I'm spending time on, which is important to then I can actually gauge ROI and that sort of thing. And so it has recently started to creep up where it becomes more of a drag and it's not 100% there yet. And I think, I don't know, I might try and hold on through the holidays and see what happens and then probably shift over because volumes are only going up and I keep breaking sales records every month. So things hopefully will continue to grow. And then at that point, I'll probably switch over, but I'm not quite there where it's driving me insane.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit, like how you're one of the few people who seem to have a banger year. What do you feel like you can attribute that change to, especially after grinding for so many years?
Yeah, that's been a big question and one I've discussed with a few different people as I talk about the year and that sort of thing, friends and family. I'm not sure there's a single point that I can identify that really has led to the growth. I think probably if I looked at it, getting into REI a couple months ago, like 4 or 5 months ago, probably has a ripple effect everywhere. And so that's been huge. I've gone from 0 stores to 1 store to 7 stores in less than 6 months. And I'm working with store managers directly. So I'm not in their national buy-in program. It's their buy local program that I'm in. And that growth has been crazy, but that's the wholesale growth that's gone from like 0 to 10K a month, that sort of thing. And from D2C, that growth has also nearly doubled. Like before, I was getting maybe 100 orders a month sometimes over the last few years. And now it's at the point where I'm getting several hundred a month and hopefully will only go up. And so I think part of it is the REI ripple effect and then kind of the buzz that generates. The Instagram algorithm, which I relied on too much over the past, has changed substantially. And you kind of have to pay to have more than like a tiny percentage of your followers see your posts, which I could rant and rave for another couple hours about that whole thing. I have started paid ads, and so I think that's helped a little bit, but the ROI is not huge there. Like I'm not doing like 2, 3, 5 or whatever in terms of ROAS. It's more just a smaller edition, and I've slowly been scaling that up. My spend isn't that much. It's like $100 a day or whatever. And so I can't feel like that is the huge attribution that has led to the huge sales growth. It's probably just a combination of things. I think some of it is the fundamentals. I've tried to focus on the fundamentals for years, building out flows, building out automations with email and SMS and those sorts of things, and kind of getting the basics down. And I think the basics, that foundation of me working on it for many years, finally perhaps paid off a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, do you have, with this business, like, do you come in and set like yearly goals or have expectations for how you want to run the business? Or how do you look at this business? Is it a hobby to you and then you'll take it wherever it goes?
Yeah, that's also the big question mark of the year. Before this year, I didn't think it was possible to turn it into something that I could provide for my family and like pay my mortgage and that sort of thing, and thought it was more of just a passion project. But this year has shown me, I think, that there is great potential out there. I brought in like a fractional CFO kind of consultant guy recently, and he's been really useful to dig into the numbers because basically everything's just been bouncing around in my head. And so I've tried to pull it out of my head and put it on paper a little bit more over the last year, and with the idea of bringing someone else on board and having them dig into the stuff that's not just in my head. And so it's a good question. It is a very niche, like geo-specific brand, and I've started to expand just beyond Mount Rainier. So I've got some stickers and hats that look really cool that are coming soon for the other national parks here in Washington. I want to build that out. I want to focus on other mountains and maybe even extend the brand and maybe build the brand into like a general mountain brand. Who knows what the future could hold? Because there's, looking at my TAM for the small geo brand that I am, there's not a ton there, but I think that just seeing the REI traction that I got this year, just seeing just basics Facebook paid ads that haven't been great, they've been like okay. The potential there, I think, is pretty big. And it's so interesting to like sit back and think about brands and how much potential there is in a brand, even if it's like a geo-specific brand. There's my wife and I we're talking about this the other night. There's so many brands that are on Instagram advertising that you would never think are a real thing. And then you look at it and they're like totally a real business, and they have employees and they pay people, and they're, hopefully keeping the lights on and not just losing lots of VC money, but actually like a legitimate, profitable business, which is pretty cool. And I think that there's a lot of potential out there. And even just with a few million people in the Northwest, and then the few million people that visit Mount Rainier a year, like I think that there's a lot of potential there for the business to be more than just the side project hobby. And we'll see where it leads me, because a couple of weeks ago, I was actually part of layoffs at my day job. And so I've got like that question mark has a triple exclamation point at the end of it now. Can this pay my salary kind of thing? Can this replace my salary? So we're kind of at a fork in the road, so to speak, right now.
Yeah. I mean, like how much, I assume, well, I mean, you can tell me, like, have you been pulling any money out of the business at all up to this point? Or has it just like any profit you have, it goes back into products and inventory and improvements?
Yeah, I've really been pushing hard on expanding and products, and basically all the profits are going back into it. And so I haven't been great with financials and dealing. That's one of the big learnings that I have this year, is working on cash flow and actually paying attention to numbers, because I've been so defensive just being me running this business and having things explode to having constant sellouts, where I haven't looked at cash flow. And I got into a huge bind like a couple of weeks ago with not having enough cash basically to pay for upcoming products and upcoming releases that I know that REI is interested in and other people are pre-ordering and that sort of thing. And so I haven't pulled anything out, but I'm doing a lot of financial foundational work right now, and I'm hopefully setting up the business in a way that can be a lot easier in the future, because what's interesting is I was reading the Profit First book a couple of weeks ago. I started reading that, and that's been really good, because I think a lot of the mistakes that the author was talking about, where he looked at the bank balance and was like, oh, this is all the money I have to spend. Let's go and spend it on new inventory or whatnot, and not set anything aside for profit, and kind of think of profit as this last thing on the to-do list. I definitely have fallen into that trap quite a bit. So I'm reading through that, kind of going to adhere to a lot of those philosophies and hopefully improve things for the future so I can pull out the funds and keep the business going.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, for my standpoint, in the early days, as you try to ramp up to a generally sustainable kind of revenue point, you do need to essentially work for free. Like, you either work for free or you put a bunch of money into it and then, pull that money
Hmm.
right back out. So, but if you're in a position where you're trying to figure out, can this be my breadwinner? Can this, put a roof over my head and food on the table? Then you do really need to start thinking about, how do we take into effect my salary and make sure that the numbers and the margins really work out. Do you even have like a general top line number that you're targeting where you're like, okay, if I could just hit this amount, then this will be my new full-time thing. I want to make it work. Fortunately, my partner, make some money or something, keep it pretty lean, and then we'll kind of grow from there. Or do you have your resume out in a bunch of places right now and kind of like foot in, toes still dipped in the water, or whatever that saying is?
Yeah, a little bit of both. That number that I want to try and aim for is a work in progress. And so that's something that I do want to figure out is like, hey, what can replace my salary, and can this be the breadwinner type situation? I am also looking at places and applying, and kind of am exploring the realm of contract freelance work, which I've done part-time over the past few years. And so thinking about combining that with Rainier Watch, hand in hand, do some freelance dev, do some RDub, as I call it, some ecom stuff, and maybe that combined with their forces combined can replace the full-time dev salary. I don't know. It's kind of a nebulous right now to try and figure out what is going to work and what's going to happen in the future. But it's interesting because I've got this skill set that I feel like is pretty darn unique, and I'm definitely a better developer than I am running an ecom business. And I'm excited actually to dig into my own site and learn a lot more code as it relates to Shopify, because that's only been something I've dabbled in the past. And so I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of open-ended questions that I'm going to have hopefully some answers to in the next few months. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I know you might not have the answers, but you got to have like a gut feel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is your gut telling you?
Yeah, I feel like so Rainier Watch has I hit six figures in top line D2C like sales this like a month or two ago, which was incredible to me. And I never thought that I would get there. Like, I remember the early days of striving for a couple thousand a month and feeling like that was like impossible almost. And so, yeah, it's hard to say. Like, I think at least 2 to 3 times that or something like that would have to be there to replace my like six-figure dev salary. Cause it's tough. Like, I'm in Seattle, which is one of the most expensive places in the world to live. So it's not like I'm in the middle of nowhere where I can go really streamlined with expenses and can really like dig in. So it's a hard question. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, are you, speaking of being in Seattle, you were doing like markets. Are you still doing that? Is that part of your strategy?
Yeah, it's been one of my pretty good sales channels this year. And I actually hired someone to run them for me a couple months ago, just with a family and stuff. I don't really want to be doing that all weekend long. And so that's been pretty interesting. I'm waiting till the end of the season. It kind of spikes up in summer and then spikes up around Christmas time for the frequency. But this guy's been running them for me, and he's been awesome. He's been running them probably like 2 to 5 of them a month for me. And it's a very much a learning, like a work in progress, a learning which markets are good, which ones aren't good, especially as they relate to our customers. And, the weather, there's so many variables that go into it. It's really hard to tell, but some markets bomb and some, oh, speaking of bombs, we went to the Evergreen State Fair. That was a giant mistake by me. I thought that it would be a great opportunity. The person that had mentioned it to us, like the person in charge of bringing vendors in, she had had told us to make sure we have enough inventory because we'll probably sell out. That was kind of her words, but basically it was just a giant tragedy. Like, oh gosh, we got maybe a couple visitors at the booth an hour, which was the lowest amount of visits. And the conversions on that were like pretty good actually compared to most markets, but just zero interest in the booth, which was really interesting. I went there for a couple hours to experience it firsthand, and I had to cut the cord and we had to leave early because we were there
Oh, wow.
slotted for 5 days and couldn't make it. And it was already a 4-figure loss after paying my contractor to run the market. So,
Yeah, so
um,
walk me through, because I haven't brought anyone on the show before who's done like markets or is actively doing markets. Like, what kind of cost is it typically to rent a booth? How do you find them? How do you know they're good? And then how do you just manage the logistics of it? Like, it seems like you're just packing up and relocating. It seems
Yeah,
like it's just a ton of work.
it is definitely a ton of work. You got that right. So basically, it's a lot of trial and error to figure out which ones work well. This is the first year that my contractor guy's been running them. And so I've kind of chalked it up as, I hope we are somewhat profitable on it. And I hope that it is good for him, good for me. And then at the end of the year, though, I see it kind of more as marketing. Like, we're getting the name out there, the recognition. People, especially with apparel, I've recognized that there's a large percentage of people that don't really care to buy it online only. And so having a booth, having REI presence, like, those are legitimizers in people's thoughts. And I'll oftentimes get emails or DMs or that sort of thing asking, like, hey, where can I find your products? Well, the website's open 24 hours a day, but they want to go and touch and feel and see things in person, which I get, because apparel isn't the same as something else that it's size specific, right? So the in-person markets, finding them is a process. There's a lot of them in the area. Luckily, in this area, there's a lot of markets that run. We don't get real winter here. There's no snow, so they run a lot of times throughout the year. And you've talked to other vendors and you kind of find out which ones are good and which ones are bad. The booth fees themselves range a lot. Sometimes it's a night market, so it's only like $100 to enter. And sometimes if it's a multi-day event, it could be, well, that fair, for example, was like $700 or so to enter the fair for 5 days. And I've heard that the fee for the other fair, we have apparently 2 state fairs in Washington, the fee for the other fair is like several thousand to get in. And that's, I think, that's several weeks in terms of, like, you set up a booth for several weeks. And so there's that aspect to it. There's the logistics that I've been figuring out. And essentially, so my guy that runs them, he has a storage unit that I rented for him. He has the apparel there. He gathers it before the market, figures out what quantities to bring there. And then if he needs a restock, for example, I send him a restock of shirts if he needs more shirts. And then he'll run the booth for whatever X amount of hours. And then I'll pay him, and I pay him at market wages, which I think is important. And then
Are you using
there's a
Shopify?
commission structure.
Are you using like Shopify app? So
Shopify POS.
Yeah.
Yep. Years ago when I was on WooCom, I tried to use Square, which is what, most people use in person, and it works pretty well, but they're having the inventory integrated and the payments and everything else, like, is just massively helpful. And that's one of the reasons why I switched to Shopify like 2 years ago, which was foolish. I should have done it way sooner, but their POS is tightly integrated, which is super, super nice.
What does that booth look like? Or what kind of investments have you made to the booth? Do you have to bring your tent? Do you have like a little changing room or pop-up like tent, toilet cover thing kind of, or coat hangers and racks? Like, how intricate are your booths, and does it change for shows as well?
It doesn't change too much on a show-to-show basis. Sometimes I think next year might be a year where we evaluate what the prior year did at a market and then maybe change the product line. Our product line changes a little bit show to show based on the region. Like, if this certain show is near North Cascades National Park, for example, like, we'll have more of that stuff there. If it's closer to a different national park, we'll have more of that stuff specific to that park there. The display itself, I don't yet have like a fully custom tent that you've seen really cool vendors have online. Those are pretty expensive, but I'm hoping to make that investment maybe in the next year or two. I've got several tables. I've got a really cool wood display for hats that has an engravement of a mountain on it made by a local woodworker, which helps to draw in attention. A spinning display for stickers, booth table covers that are kind of foresty and outdoorsy, and then a big banner that goes across the back that has a display of the mountain and like a little description of the brand. A few other posters that I've made over the year or two, and it's a lot about, I don't want to dump thousands into it yet in terms of like display, because you could go real crazy and just make the most coolest display tent ever. And there's all sorts of little touches that you can add here and there, but I'm trying to like just gradually, step by step, as sales start to increase, like, put a little bit more investment into the display and how things look. I think it looks pretty darn good, and there's parts of me that don't really want it to be super professional. Like, I don't love going to a farmer's market or like a craft market and seeing this booth that they roll in and it's clear that they've spent like, $5,000 on a entire display, and they're like the professional folks, because I think that part of my brand is is more of it's a grassroots thing. It's like this small family run local business and doesn't always have the high polish glossiness of a huge super professional display.
How does your agent work in terms of his quote unquote like sales strategy, and like is he just standing behind a table and waiting for people to order, or is he trying to bring people in and be like, hey, you look good and a Rainier shirt, something like that? Do you have any
Yeah,
tactics for that?
the philosophy that I've worked with him on it's a little bit more helpful, informative, and probably more standoffish than proactive in terms of like what I want him to be. He's the face of the brand, right? Like he's out there, and it's not in my personal wheelhouse nor in my desire for the brand to be yelling at people across the street or whatnot, or even being super salesy in that way, but just being there, explaining the brand. Most people haven't heard of the brand or have walk in and say, what is this thing? I don't get it. So just explaining things and explaining the story behind the brand, the story behind the products, and kind of the benefit of the products, right? Like donating 1% of every purchase to national parks and being able to talk to like the value props and those sorts of things are kind of what I've trained him on. And he comes from a background in sales, and so he knows and understands kind of what people are looking for. And he was a gem of a find too. He's been awesome, and he has a background in running booths for his day job, and so it's not unfamiliar territory to him, which is really nice.
What does a commission structure typically look like for someone running booths like that?
Yeah, so he makes a flat hourly rate and then has a percentage commission on top of like the sales that come in for the day. And it's not tiered, it's just a flat percentage. I've thought about making it tiered, but at this point I'm just kind of trying to keep it more simple than too complicated.
Yeah. And then so like your break even point per market. So it sounds like you've got $200, $100 for the booth. How many hours is that? Like he's out there all day, like 6 hours, something like that?
Yeah, it depends on the event. Some night markets, which actually night markets do really well depending on the location, are 4 to 5 hours. But then you've got that state fair market, which was like 8 to 10 hours or something for him, which is a lot. And then you think about margins on products and that sort of thing. Like the break even point is, I don't want to get into specific numbers, but it's out there.
I mean, I can throw numbers out. Like, so you're talking 4 hours, $25 an hour is probably what I'd rate for this type of role. Maybe it's higher in Seattle. You're talking $100 for the person and $100 for the booth. Talking about $200 or $300 of your cost. So you have to sell, $600, including your product costs, to kind of break even.
And that's,
so if you got like, what's your shirt cost? $30?
Some of my eco tees are 36. They're the high end t-shirts.
So that's like 20 shirts you need to sell to break even?
Yeah, I think so. Math on the spot is hard, but the break even point isn't so sales wise from these markets. Like the sales do pretty well. It can range from 600 to 1,000 on the lower point to over 2,000 for like a really good market for my brand. And it fluctuates year to year, which is really interesting too. I think this year in general, I haven't seen great sales from in-person markets, and talking to other vendors that do this as well, this year has been kind of a lower year. I think it was maybe last year where it seemed like sales were up compared to the median sales numbers. And I think that was probably just, people getting out after the COVID thing and spending money and being outside and shopping around, which was not possible for a couple of years. And so like the sales, it's pretty cool to see, you selling these products and making a couple thousand in a day. I remember, and it still a lot of times can beat my website depending on the day, depending on like just an average day, it can definitely beat my website in terms of those sales numbers. So it's a pretty good channel, I think.
But it is really hit or miss. It seems like it's almost like
it's a lot of trial and error. Yeah. I've talked to Jimmy a lot from Atomic Child because he does a ton of markets, like way more than me. And it's about this because he's like the market master, right? And so it is trial and error a lot. Like you don't know, and year to year, whether it's so dependent on a ton of different variables. And so I don't see it as like I was saying, like I don't see it as a huge profit center. It's more just getting the name out there, the recognition, and hopefully turning a profit at the end of the year. So it's more of like a marketing spend at this point.
Yeah. Is there a certain point where you just kill that and focus on,
it
just seems like a lot of work if it's just like a marketing thing. Like I feel like there might be better marketing channels, but I could be wrong too. Just like that personal touch I think a lot of people might sleep on, especially in the early days.
Yeah, I do like it for a lot of reasons. And I like because, I might kill it eventually, who knows, but I like it because it's this personal contact. It's this in-person event. And you also being such a geo-specific, like very niche brand, like there's not, we can tackle the area that most of our products resonate with, the Pacific Northwest, the Seattle area, pretty easily, rather than if it was, like Beard Brand, you could have a pop-up every weekend in every city around the US.
Yeah.
And that would be insane.
It would be a lot of work, Where can people buy your shirts? Where can they support you?
Yeah, the website is shop.rainierwatch.com. Also 7 REI stores, hopefully 8 soon in the Pacific Northwest around the greater Seattle area. I've got a page on my website. It's just /locations to see all the different smaller retailers as well as REI that sell my products, which is pretty awesome to see that support.
And on Twitter for you, you're pretty active on Twitter as well, right?
I tweet too much. Yeah, it's dangerous. Yeah, my username is not easy to decipher based on me saying it out loud, but it's Austriker, AUSTRIKER 27. And yeah, that's me. I'm just tweeting and learning and sharing mistakes and hoping other people can learn from my mistakes on there.
Sweet, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on to the show and sharing your story. I think there's a lot more to talk about, so definitely follow him on Twitter. And thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Eric. It's been a blast. I love it. Thank you.
This has been another e-commerce conversations. Cheers. Keep on growing.